Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy M.K.S here, back at you with another video. Probably should have made another cup of tea. Maybe I always get thirsty for tea. Anyway, obviously this is part 3 of what I would love for the Italian football authorities or foundations to work towards, as well as Celtic. So yeah, I decided to combine the two together. I hope you check out parts 1 and 2 if you haven't already done so, and I'd love to hear what you think about each idea, each point I make, and what you think Italian football and or Celtic foundations, respectively, should support or fundraise for. Can't think of much else to say in the intro, but yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Part of me is a bit skeptical, has a bit of self-doubt, as I often do, in terms of as you can probably tell, sometimes I get a bit nervous when I make videos or trip over my words or things like that, and I'll lose my chain of thought, things like that. But another part of me wonders whether the Italian football authorities and clubs and that sort of thing, and people involved in football in Italy and or the Celtic Foundation or Celtic, the football club itself, will somehow stumble across this mad guy here, i.e. myself, and will actually be interested in supporting these things. But anyway, I thought I'd share the ideas anyway, and possibly try and find a way to share it with Italian football authorities and or Celtic as well. But yeah, again, I know I mentioned, I think it was in part 2, I asked if you can think of any ways any suggestions that you could send me as to how I could promote these ideas, and how they would benefit both the club and the charities they could support. Anyway, I'm going to try and stop baffling and crack on my list, because I don't want the video to be too long. And here goes. So number 21, just to recap, I think it'd be great if Italian football and Celtic fundraised for through the foundations of or possibly Italian teams and Celtic would fundraise for supporters clubs, academies, training, education, mentorship, and things like that, especially for people in developing countries and what I call the six, and in Celtic's case in Ireland, and to have football academies, as I say, and sports clubs all around the world, in as many countries as possible, which will hopefully be of mutual benefit, as I often say. Number 22, I hope for Italian football and Celtic to have, as I say, supporters clubs and academies and other such ways to support, methods to support First Nations people, indigenous people across the Americas and Australasia, to have possibly the first football academies for indigenous people from across the Americas and Australasia, to help them to get into football as well, support them in areas like STEM and learning about things like business, and all sorts of things like that, which hopefully would empower them as much as possible. Number 23, I hope they'll work with other NGOs and charities, as I mentioned before briefly. But yeah, I think it'd be great if they worked with as many NGOs and charities and foundations as possible with shared goals, and hopefully in the future they will, once again, as they did, in the past, once again they will hopefully have football tournaments and things like that, which will raise funds for charity, and maybe even work with Soccer Aid and be part of that, the Celtic Foundation, being involved in that sort of thing. I'm wary with charities and foundations, NGOs and things like that, about making sure that the money does go to those in need and does what they say they're going to do, and that sort of thing. Number 24, I hope, as I say, they will support former colonies, and again, sorry for repeating myself, but I hope it will benefit the clubs themselves, the Italian clubs and Celtic. I hope we'll all benefit through a mutual partnership. But I also hope, as I say, former colonies, places like China and India and all over Asia and Africa, countries that are colonized, basically, I hope will benefit. And also that, especially in Celtic's case, it's a bit hard to say with Italian football, because Italian football did have an empire and that sort of thing. But I mean, Italian football could perhaps still work with emerging market economies, and also countries that are growing their economy, and also obviously well-populated countries, because obviously having more fans, I think, hopefully will help in terms of sponsorship for the clubs, which hopefully will lead to success on the field. But I also hope, I say, that they will do a lot of good work for those countries involved and for the disadvantaged people individually. That I hope they will help. Number 25, again, being a bit biased, I would love for them to fundraise for republics around the world, as I support republicanism. When I say republicanism, I mean republics, basically, just to clarify. One thing about Celtic on that note, one of the negative things I think that the club does is there's sometimes involvement with the IRA and things like that, and I disagree with that. I disagree with violence and football hooliganism or things like that. I think Celtic fans should only, and Italian football fans and Celtic fans should only use violence in self-defence, and I'd love for the clubs and the Italian FA and Celtic to possibly even work together, again, all these things, to tackle football hooliganism, law breaking, all that, encourage the fans. I know fans won't always listen, but I hope they'll encourage the fans to be respectful and not to be involved in football hooliganism or anything like that, or any law breaking at all, and to make sure everything's done legally, and also to encourage good morals from a young age. I think it's quite coincidental. I've got probably can't see it, but I've got a sort of Italy t-shirt. It's not an official one, but it says Italy on it. And also I've got this top, which does remind me of Celtic because it's green, just like Celtic's colours, which are white and green. But when I wear something that's green or think of something that's green, I think of Celtic because of they play in white and green. But yeah, so I just thought I'd make that point. Number 26. This is a difficult issue to talk about. I know I've talked about it before, and I know it's something that our rivals, in terms of Celtic anyway, the rivals sort of bash us with, but an embarrassing part of their club's history was a child abuse scandal, and that did make me question whether I should support Celtic. I think there were basically a couple of things that made me wonder whether I should support Celtic, as well as Italian football as well. There were a few things sometimes I think with the prejudice and football hooliganism in Italian football, and with Celtic, the child abuse scandal, and also when I wrote a lot of my ideas, people mocked my ideas and also my punctuation, but I suppose most people mock my punctuation anyway. So it did make me question whether I made the right decision being a Celtic fan. But overall, I like to think, and I hope I'm right, that the club generally does positive things. But I think Italian football and Celtic, on that note, possibly especially the latter, should look at ways to prevent child abuse and also ensure children are safe, and in Celtic's case, hopefully find ways to reparate any victims of abuse that have happened historically. So Rangers often say Celtic sweep it under the carpet, so I thought it would only be fair to mention that point, as embarrassing as it is in the club's history. But yeah, I hope the club will if they admit to mistakes that were made and reparate the victims, then hopefully that will mean the club can move on, but they'll do the right thing, so to speak, if you like. I don't always like to say right or wrong as absolutes, because I think it is debatable, generally speaking, but in this case I think it'd be hard to argue that it wouldn't be the right thing to reparate the victims that happened, that were abused by people, hopefully a very small amount of them, but that were involved in the club, as unfortunate as that was. Number 27, I hope they'll be if new investors, shareholders and sponsors invest in Italian football teams and Celtic respectively, again with a partnership, maybe whoever invests in Italian football can invest in Celtic and vice versa, but if and when they invest, again I hope 10% of that will go towards the foundations and the charitable work that the club does, as well as the clubs do, as well as benefiting the clubs by buying even better players and investing in academies and things like that. And I hope they will acknowledge the top sponsors of the foundation as well as the clubs generally. Number 28, again, I hope they will invest in things and sponsor things and fund things, fundraise for things and things like that make the world a better place generally, and turn negative situations into positives, like tackle climate change, help the victims of the flooding in Pakistan or a place like that, in India and other parts of Asia, and help victims of natural disasters or things like that. And help with things like the cost of living crisis. I think I forgot to mention that, but help with things like the cost of living crisis, provide water and food and shelter for those who don't have it as much as possible, and help to just basically make the world a better place, tackle poverty, preferably alleviate poverty as much as possible. Even if they fail with helping everyone, at least they'll help as many people as possible. And again, hopefully change the representation of Italian clubs and Celtic respectively. I know Celtic already does a lot with charitable work, and I think it'd be great to see Italian teams do that as well. Number 29, I hope to encourage people with things in common with me, like my fellow mixed race people, possibly even olive skin people, dare I say, and also people with learning disabilities, and just generally people like from what I call the Six, again, things like that, to work together to support foundations in Italian football and Celtic to come together to tackle poverty and all those issues that I talked about. And number 30, again, I would love to hear what you think. And I was thinking of making it even a part 4 to go up to 40 ideas, 40, but I don't know if I can come up with that many ideas. I think that pretty much covers everything, like helping with the cost of living crisis, both in the UK and around the world, and things like that. And I am out. Peace and love.